Okay, so next topic is alternative investments, and there is only one reading in alternative investments. Again, there used to be multiple readings, but they have been moved to other levels over the past few years. So now there is only one reading in alternative investments, which is Introduction to Alternative Investment. So this will mostly be about theory and mostly be about different types of alternative investment, their definitions, their types, categories, and all that. And a lot of what you see here would be something that we had already discussed, like for example, hedge funds, some details related to hedge funds we have already discussed in equity part. Private equity, some details related to private equity have been discussed in earlier topics, commodities and so on. So what we will do is we will understand the broad concepts and then you can read out the details and theories. So starting with alternative investments, first a major question is that what is alternative investment? So remember, anything which is not traditional is alternative. So any investments which are not traditional are alternative investments. And what are traditional investment? Traditional investments are simple equity or debt investments. So for example, if I buy shares of company or if I buy fixed income securities, if I buy a bond, those are traditional. Anything other than that is known as alternative investment. So these can include your commodities, these can include, for example, hedge funds, these can include private equity funds, these can include your collectibles, your art, paintings, anything. So anything which is not traditional will be alternative investments. There are some key categories of some key characteristics of alternative investment that you should know, and those are that they generally have high fee, low diversification of managers and investments within alternative investment, high use of leverage. These are usually very expensive. So for example, if you are buying a real estate property, that will be very expensive. So generally you require leverage to buy it. Or for example, if you talk about commodities, mostly commodities are traded on futures as futures contracts on futures exchanges, and then again futures are leverage contracts. Or if you talk about private equity or hedge funds, they are making huge investments and quite often using leverage. Restrictions on fund redemptions, obviously the size is very big, liquidity is very low, and if someone redeems funds from the redeems its money from any of the funds, then that would leave the fund with a lesser money, or that would require the fund to sell off some assets. And when a large fund sells some assets, it may make some losses or it may not get the right price. So that's why there are restrictions on fund redemptions. So these are some uh, characteristics or some you can say characteristics through which alternative investments are defined. Some other characteristics with respect to investment include illiquidity, narrow manager specialization. It is difficult to find specialized investment managers for alternative investments. Low correlation with traditional investments, and this is one of the reasons why investors like it, because it provides diversification benefits due to low correlation. Low level of regulation, less transparency, limited and potentially problematic historic risk and return data, unique legal and tax consideration. All these are investment related characteristics of alternative investment. So generally high cost, high risk, generally high cost but lower correlation with the traditional investment, and that's why they provide some hedge against the traditional investment, because if traditional investments are falling, maybe alternative investment can provide some benefit or maybe remain stable and save losses or reduce losses. Globally, alternative investments have been a very small part compared to traditional investments in the investments in the world of investment, but their growth has been very high. So that means their proportion in the overall investment is increasing. Although a small part, but proportion is increasing because growth is very high and there has been an increasing trend towards investments into alternative investments. Compared with traditional investments, alternative investments are more likely to be characterized by high leverage, low liquidity, and less regulations. Moving on, categories of alternative investment. So some key categories can be hedge fund, private equity fund, real estate, commodities, or any others which are not any others like tangible such as wine, art, antique, stamps, coins, etc., or any intangible such as patent. Anything which is not traditional but an investment, that is known as alternative investment. Moving on to return. So what is return? Return has two components, alpha and beta. Beta is the return due to market. For example, if overall market goes up or goes down, you will get some return. Alpha is the extra return or abnormal return that you get over market due to active management or due to the skill of the investment manager. What is active versus passive? This we have already discussed. Active management means actively looking for undervalued and overvalued securities, buying undervalued, selling overvalued. Passive means just tracking a simple fund. So how do you make alpha or how do you generate alpha? So some of the strategies used to generate this alpha include absolute return, market segmentation, and concentrated portfolio. So when you are setting a return target, you can say, okay, I will outperform the market or I will give as much return as market. So I will give, for example, as much return as S&P 500 index. That is relative return. That is kind of passive. But when you are talking about alpha, you set an absolute target. So for example, you say that I will make 15% return no matter what. This is an alpha seeking strategy. That instead of following another benchmark, you are setting a absolute target for yourself. Even if market goes down, your target is 15% return. Or market segmentation. That is, for example, if you say there are two markets A and B, you think that B will outperform A over next few weeks or next few months. So you can move capital from A to B. That is market segmentation. Or concentrated portfolio. So for example, you have invested into different stocks X, Y, Z and so on. You particularly think that Y will outperform all other stocks. There is something good about it. It will outperform all other stocks in next 1 year. So what you can do is you can reduce investments everywhere in all other positions and you can increase investment in Y. So you take a concentrated position in Y. You invest a significant amount of portfolio in Y because you think it will do good. And when it outperforms all others, you will generate an abnormal return or very high return. That is another strategy. So these are strategies that are used to seek alpha. These are not mutually exclusive. So you can use multiple strategies at the same time. So absolute return, market segmentation and concentrated portfolio. Moving on to portfolio context. So when we make a portfolio, that portfolio can consist of traditional investment as well as alternative investment. So when we say looking into when we say talk about portfolio context means looking at the relationship between traditional and alternative investment and not looking at alternative or traditional investment in isolation, but rather looking at the impact that they can create by with their combination or integration. How so? If these two have low correlation, then combining these two in a portfolio can help reduce risk and can help generate high risk adjusted return. Why? Because if one of these investments is falling, other would be increasing or other would be stable because they have low correlation. So combining these two can help diversify and can help reduce risk through diversification. So when we talk about portfolio context, we mean that these two should not be looked at in isolation, but should be looked at with respect to their integration benefits. But then again, when you talk about integrating these two, there are some hurdles to it or there are some challenges to it. What are the challenges? Traditional investments data is easily available, but alternative investments risk return data is difficult to obtain. Even if you obtain it, you wouldn't know if that is reliable or not. Identifying appropriate allocation is difficult. How much should you invest in traditional? How much should you invest in alternative? Selecting portfolio managers is difficult because in alternative investments there are very less or it is very difficult to find specialized alternative investment managers because the universe is very small. So due to these challenges, integration becomes difficult. So that is about portfolio contacts or integrating these investments. Moving on to investment structure, what kind of structures exist in alternative investment? So for example, if I talk about a hedge fund or if I talk about a private equity fund, what are the structures? So there are two types of partnership. So there are generally in these funds structures are of partnership agreement. So they generally operate with partnership structures. That means all the investors or managers are partners. With respect to partnership, there are two types of partners, limited partner and general partner. General partner are those who manage the fund, and limited partner are those who are the investors who provide the capital. So limited partners who are the investors provide the money to be managed, and then general partners manage the fund. So limited partners are investors, general partners are fund managers. When they are managing the fund, obviously they will charge some fee. That fee can come in into two forms. So there can be a fixed fee, fixed management fee. For example, 2% of assets. So whatever the assets under management are, AUM, assets under management, 2% of that is paid to, for example, is being paid to general partner as a fee. This is management fee. And another component of the fee can be incentive fee. That is fee on outperformance, fee paid for outperforming the expectations or target. So for example, if investors tell general partner that if you make a return of more than 20%, I will pay you 10% of total return. Or nevertheless, whatever return you make, I will pay you 20% of the total profits. So 20% of the total profit will be paid to you. That is known as incentive fee. For example, 20% of profits. There can be any structure, 5%, 10%, 110, whatever. Generally a structure is 220. So 220 structure is very common. 2% management fee and 20% of profits. So this is how these funds are structured, or these are the investment structure. There is a general partner, there is a limited partner who is investor, and there is a general partner who is manager. And two types of fees being paid are management fee and incentive fee. Now there is a chance that general partner might not work in the best interest of investor, or maybe is not able to produce high returns for the investor. So in order to ensure that general partner tries to make higher return, what limited partner can do is limited partner can place some restrictions on fee payment or can come up with some provisions. Like for example, one of the provision is hurdle rate. So for example, limited partner can say that I will only pay you incentive fee if you make a return greater than 10%. So this 10% becomes hurdle rate, that at least this rate should be crossed, or this benchmark should be crossed for receiving the incentive fee. So then general partner would want to make a higher return than a return higher than at least this rate. This is known as hurdle rate. Another provision that limited partner can use or fund can use limited partners can use is high watermark. What does high watermark mean? Let's say that fund size is currently $100. Let's say with time it increases to $120. It again decreases to 115. So this is the last highest watermark achieved, or last maximum value achieved. So high watermark provision would say or would state that incentive fee will only be paid if you cross the last highest benchmark, or last highest value, or last highest watermark. So if you are at 115, if fund size is at 115, general partner will not be paid the incentive fee. For incentive fee to be paid, it should be higher than 120. Now let's say it goes up again to 125. Now the watermark is set as at 125. Now next time for a fee to be paid, size should be greater than or larger than 125. So that is known as high watermark provision. Any problem so far? So that is about fee and structures. Now starting with the types of investment, so let's start with hedge funds first. This is something that we have discussed in earlier periods as well. So what is hedge fund? Hedge fund is a fund which will invest into, which would generally take high risk for high return. It will invest into it will take multiple positions. It can take leverage positions. It may invest into derivatives. It may take short positions. It may invest into commodity, equity, fixed income, whatever. So hedge funds make high return by taking high risk by using alternative means of investments, and they generally have low correlation with traditional investment. Even if overall market is falling, maybe some hedge fund is making money. Why? Because it took a short position. It could anticipate a market fall and it took a short position. Hedge funds other characteristics are low regulations. So generally there are low regulations on hedge funds, less transparency. Generally returns are overstated, risk is understated. Why? Because generally only those hedge funds would want to be included into hedge fund indices or want to report data to public which are performing well or which are generating high return. Those who are not generating high return may not want to be included or become a part of any hedge fund index. So a hedge fund index may show overstated return because it only would include good performers and may show lower risk. Secondly, what is the risk? So this is a big size of fund in which only elite investors would be investing. What is the risk? If any of the investors withdraws money, then hedge fund will have to sell those assets or sell those shares or sell those securities in the market to reimburse the money or to give back the money, to return the money to the shareholder. And what can be the impact? The impact it maybe it will have to close some positions from which it was expecting a gain in future. And also when it goes to market and place an order to sell a big portion of assets, then eventually market prices can fall. Why? Because investors would think something wrong is happening with these assets, so market prices can fall and it may end up losing value. So redemptions can lead to loss of value for the fund. So what funds generally do is that they put some kind of penalties on redemption or they put in some kind of lockup period. So these are generally the lockup period or penalties are generally the strategies used by these funds to reduce redemptions or to restrict redemptions from the fund. Or they may ask the investor to provide a notice of at least 30 to 90 days period before withdrawing investment. These are different strategies being used by them. So we will come back to funds of funds. First let's discuss hedge fund strategies. So what are key hedge fund strategies? It can use event driven strategies. For example, merger arbitrage, distress restructuring, activist, special situation. So it can invest with respect to an event. So for example, if a company is doing very bad, it is distressed, it is being restructured, it is near bankruptcy, so its securities would be selling at a significant discount. So what a hedge fund may do is that it may buy fixed income securities, it may buy senior debt and short junior debt, it may buy preferred stock and short common stock. So what it can do is it may buy less risky securities of that company and sell more risky securities of that company. So eventually when prices fall, the price for more risky securities would fall at a higher rate, and price for less risky would either not fall or fall at a lower value. So overall it will make a gain. From short position it will make a gain, from long position it will lose out, but the gain would more than offset the long loss. Or it may take a position on a company's board, or and then force the company to change management or to restructure or to sell something or to buy something. So all these are event driven strategies. Then relative value strategies, for example, fixed income arbitrage, fixed income asset backed, fixed income general, volatility, multi strategy. So what are these strategies? In these strategies, they analyze the relative value of different assets and they find out the cheaper one and buy the cheaper one. So the assumption is that law of one price should prevail, and so if there is any mismatch, so that will give you a return. So for example, market neutral or zero beta portfolio. So buy convertible bond and short common stock. If prices fall, if value falls, you will gain from short common stock. You may lose out from here, but the loss will not be as much as gain from short position. If value goes up, you can convert your bond into equity and can benefit from high growth of equity. So these are some strategies. Fixed income asset back. For example, you look at misprice, you find out the prices of ABS and MBS, and you find out, if you find out any security which is mispriced, which you think has a higher value but selling for lower price, you may buy it. If you find out something being overpriced, you sell it. Fixed income general, focus on relative value within fixed income market, so buying the cheaper ones, selling the expensive ones. Volatility, that is go long or short market volatility through options. If you think volatility will increase in future, you go long it. If you think volatility will decrease in future, risk will decrease, you go short it. Multi-strategy, do not focus on trade type, rather look for opportunities wherever they might exist. So wherever you get an opportunity, you just take it. Macro strategies, for example, identifying those countries or those economies which are expected to do good and then investing into those. Equity hedge include market neutral. For example, making a portfolio in which you take long and short position in such a manner that beta becomes zero. That is, you are not exposed to any market risk. And then you take long positions in undervalued and short positions in overvalued. So you benefit from your analysis or from your ability to find undervalued or overvalued securities. Even if market goes up or goes down, that doesn't matter. What only matters is your decision to, or your ability to find out undervalued or overvalued security. Fundamental growth means that investing into those companies which have expected to give growth in expected to post high growth in future. Value, investing into those companies which are selling at a cheaper price in market. Quantitative directional, identifying the trends and finding out which stock is going to go up or go down based on the past trends. Short buyers, taking more short positions than long positions. Sector specific, identifying a particular sector or opportunity in a particular sector and then investing into that particular sector. So for example, if you identified a particular opportunity in our technology sector, then you invest into that sector, which is sector specific. So there can be many strategies, and a hedge fund wouldn't necessarily use one strategy. A hedge fund can be using multiple strategies at the same time. So most of the funds are multi-strategy funds which are using multiple strategies at the same time. So this is about the hedge funds, or this is about the strategies that they use. Diversification benefit, they generally have low correlation with traditional investments. So they offer diversification. Secondly, instead of investing, how can you further benefit from diversification? So what you can do is, instead of investing into one hedge fund, you can invest into multiple hedge funds. But then that wouldn't be easy, because that would require a lot of analysis, that would require a lot of money, because there is a requirement to invest a large amount of money into hedge fund, to be an investor in a hedge fund. So then what you can do is, you can select that one hedge fund which uses multiple strategies. So you can select multi-strategy hedge fund. That hedge fund would be using multiple strategies, so its investments would be diversified. and you can benefit from diversification. Or what you can do is, there are funds available. Those funds provide you an opportunity to invest into multiple funds. How? So let's say there is a hedge fund A, hedge fund B, hedge fund C, and hedge fund D. Now there can be a fund which invests into these funds, and this is known as fund of funds. So what you can do is, you as an investor can go and invest into this fund of fund. So you will get away from all the hassle of selecting fund, finding out hedge fund, analyzing it, or relying on one particular hedge fund, but instead you will have exposure to multiple hedge fund. So your investment will be diversified. Secondly, there will be a fund of funds or a different management group which will be doing all the shortlisting, all the selection and everything for you. But if this fund of fund is doing all this, then this will charge some fee. So there is again some management fee and some incentive fee, and generally it is 1 to 10, that is 1% and 10%, 1% management and 10% incentive. So what happens with respect to investment in these fund of funds is that this turns out to be expensive. Why? Because this fund of fund is investing into these funds. These hedge funds will be charging fee, let's say 20% and 2%, and then this fund of fund is charging fee for itself, let's say 1% and 10%. So then there becomes, or there happen to be two layers of fees. One layer being paid to hedge funds and another layer being paid to fund of fund. So that is a disadvantage, that it can become expensive, or because it has two layers of fee. Otherwise, the advantage is that it provides more diversification and reduces the hassle of selection. These are funds of funds. Going on, this is an example. AWJ Capital is a hedge fund with $100 million of initial investment capital. They charge 2% management fee based on asset under management at year end. At year, and this is important to look at, it can be at year start or year end, usually it is year end, and a 20% incentive fee. In its first year, AWJ Capital has a 30% return. Assuming management fees are calculated at end of period valuation, what are the fees earned by AWJ if incentive and management fees are calculated independently? So what is the management fee? Management fee is 2% of 100, hedge fund with 100 million capital. So it started with 100 million. On 100 million, it made a 30% return. So it becomes 130 million. So value at year end is 130, and 2% of 130 would be management fee. So management fee will be 2% of 130, which is 2.6 million. Then incentive, they have told you that incentive and management fee are independent of each other, which means this is calculated separately, incentive is calculated separately. Incentive at 20% of return. So return was 30%, that means 30 million, and 20% of 30 million should be paid as incentive, which is 6 million. So total amount being paid is 8.6 million. Total return which was made was 30 million. From 30 million, 8.6 has been paid as fee. So remaining is 21.4 million. So this is the effective return to the investor. Although fund made 30% return, but investor got 21.4%. Second question says, assuming that incentive fee is calculated based on return net of the management fee. So they are telling you that you do not multiply 20% with the total return, but you take return net of management fee. So in this case, total return was 30, management fee is 2.6. So incentive will be applied on 30 minus 2.6 multiplied by 20%, which is 5.48. And you can calculate total fee and then effective return to investor. Any problem so far? Then they say, if the fee structure specifies a hurdle rate of 5% and an incentive fee is based on returns in excess of hurdle rate. That means incentive will be paid on return in excess of hurdle rate. Up to 5% nothing will be paid, and then above that you will get some return. What are the fees? So management remains be the same management fee. For incentive fee, you know that total return is 30 million, but from this 30 million 5% is your hurdle rate. So it should only be paid on the return above 5%. So total return was 30%. 5% is hurdle rate. That means incentive should only be paid on 25% or 30 minus 5, which is 25 million. So you pay an incentive on, and also it is net of management fee, so minus management fee. So incentive should be paid on 20% of amount net of 5 and net of management fee, that is 4.48 million. So there can be different types of structures. You should be able to calculate the incentive or management fee and effective return and total fee based on the structure which is provided to you. There can be different structures. This we have discussed that hedge funds may use leverage, derivatives, borrowing. Frequent drawdowns and redemptions can lead to fall of funds, and to protect themselves from redemptions, they keep lockup periods, they keep redemption fees. Moving on, hedge fund valuation issues. So valuation can be done either on trading net asset value or reported net asset value. What is the difference between trading and reporting? So let's say that the fund has a net asset value of $100 per share per unit. Let's say, for example, based on its asset, market value turns out to be $100 per unit. But when this fund goes to, if let's say today it has to redeem all the funds, return all the money to the investor, and let's say if it goes to the market and places all the assets for sale, then it wouldn't get this same value. Why? Because as soon as it places the sell order, price will fall in market. If this asset is not liquid, if this is very liquid, buyers are available, then no problem. But if the buyers are not available, there will be certain liquidity discount that will be applied. So that means this reported NAV is not the true NAV. There is another NAV which is known as trading NAV. Trading NAV is the NAV adjusted for liquidity discount. So if I adjust this NAV for liquidity discount and let's say I come up with 95, that is known as trading NAV. So generally those funds are those funds that have assets which are not liquid, those should be valued at trading NAV. Liquidity discount should be applied. But those which are liquid, there is no need to apply liquidity discount. Any problem so far? Okay, so when we talk about this code can be of two types. So there can be a bid cost code and there can be a ask. So now the question is that whether bid should be used or ask should be used. So that would become clear from this MCQ. Let's do it. A hedge fund with a market neutral strategy restricts its investment universe to domestic publicly traded equity securities that are actively traded. In calculating net asset value, the fund is most likely to use which of the following to value position. So key parts are investment universe, domestic publicly traded equity securities that are actively traded. As they are actively traded means they are liquid. As they are liquid, liquidity discount is not needed. So B is wrong. It can be A or it can be C. Now should he take average or should he take bid or ask? So bid or ask. What is bid? Bid is the price at which dealer will buy. That means at which you will sell. Ask is the price at which dealer will sell and you will buy. So that means you can buy at ask and sell at bid. So they have told you bid price for shorts and ask for long. So you have longs and you have short. If you have a short position, that means you have already sold the asset. How will you close this position? You will close this position by buying the asset. You have already sold it. Now in order to close this position, you will buy it. So at what price will you buy it? You will buy it at ask. So that means shorts can be closed at ask. And similarly, if you have a long position, you can close it by selling the asset. And how will you sell it? You will sell it at bid. So that means longs position should be closed at bid and shorts will be closed at ask. While this says bid for short, wrong. Ask for long, wrong. It should be ask for short or bid for long. So then A is correct. That is either you use bid for long and ask for short, or you use average of the two. So A is correct. So as long as you know these basic details, you should be able to apply it, and this will only become clear with practice. The due diligence. So when you are investing into hedge fund, one of the key parts is due diligence. And in due diligence, what you look at? You look at investment strategy, process, competitive advantage, track record, size. Overall, if there is a fund which has grown in size over the past, that means it is performing well. Otherwise, investors would have pulled out the investment and its size would have reduced. If a hedge fund has survived for long, that means it is doing good. If it has grown in size, that means it is doing good. Management style, key person risk, reputation, investor relations, plans for growth. Within these, key person risk is more important. Why? Because sometimes a hedge fund or an investment strategy is dependent on an investment manager. As long as that investment manager is with the firm, it will be making return, because fund itself is not making return. The decisions are making return, and those decisions pertain to some person, some key person. So key person risk is that particular person leaving from the fund. System risk management, that how do they manage risk and do they have appropriate systems in place to manage risk or not. This is how you perform due diligence. It is very difficult because why? Because data is not easily available. There is lack of transparency, and so due diligence for hedge funds is very difficult. But these are the areas that you look at to try to perform due diligence. Again, an example. HF alpha and HF beta invest in the same asset class using a similar investment strategy. A potential investor gathered the following data. Based on the above information, investor is most likely to invest in HF beta because of its high Sharpe ratio. So if you look into it, it looks like it has high Sharpe ratio. Beta has high Sharpe ratio, so you should invest into it, right? But then again, first question that you should ask is that how is this return being calculated? There can be different methods. There can be time weighted return, there can be money weighted return, there can be compounded, there can be different methods. So first question that you need to know is that how is this being calculated? Until and unless you know how are they calculating the return, you wouldn't know whether they are comparable or not. Maybe one is using a method which gives higher return, and another is using a method which gives lower return. So invest directly, no. Invest directly due to high return, low fees, no. So first question, how the annualized returns are calculated, and then you would know if they are comparable or not, and then you can take the decision. So this is about hedge funds. Generally, hedge funds keep a return target for hedge fund is generally an absolute return target. They generally do not follow a benchmark, but rather keep an absolute return target. They make benchmarks of their own. Moving on to another type of alternative investment, which is private equity. Again, this is something that we have discussed in earlier in equity as well. So let's go through it quickly. Leverage buyout. What is leverage buyout? For example, if a group of investors take leverage, take loan, borrow money from market, and then buy out a company, that is known as leverage buyout. Venture capital, investing into a new venture. Risk is very high, but then return is also very high. Development capital. So minority equity investments in mature companies that are looking for capital for expansion or restructuring. So as obvious from the name, meanings providing capital for development. Distressed investing. So if there is a company which is about to go bankrupt or which you think will end operation soon, or which has failed to survive, you invest into it, turn it around and then sell it. That is distressed investing. So these are different categories of private equity investments. Structure is the same that we have discussed earlier: limited partner, general partner. Fee structure is same: management fee, incentive fee. Some new terms being introduced. What is committed capital? So the amount that limited partners have agreed to provide to private equity fund, that is known as committed capital. So let's say that limited partners have agreed that we will provide you $100 million. That is known as committed capital. They may provide first 50, then 20 more, then 30 more, depending on the need. In first year, maybe $50 million of investment is being made, then 30 million, then 20 million. But committed is $100 million. Moving on, provisions for protecting limited partners. So again, limited partners have a risk that general partner may not make the required return or may fail to make the return. So what are the provisions for protecting them? There can be escrow account, clawback provision. What is escrow account? So you can set up an account and you can say, okay, I'm paying you fee, but this fee will be deposited in this escrow account. So if they fail to perform, fee can be reversed, or this escrow account can be used to take back the fee. Clawback provision, similar again, like this requires general partner to return any funds distributed as incentive fee until they have received their initial investment back. So let's say if there are losses and limited partners have not received their initial investment back, then this provision requires general partner to return the fee that they had received, incentive fee that they had received. They had received an incentive fee because the expectation was that overall it will make profit. So far they were making profit, but at the end they ended up making losses. So that fee which was paid as incentive should be reversed. In addition to management and incentive fee, LBO firms receive other fees that include the buyout price of the company if deal falls through, fee for arranging divestitures of assets after buyout's completion. So in order to conduct transaction, they need to incur some cost, and for those costs they may charge additional fee that is related to transaction cost. Leverage buyout we have discussed. Management buyout we had discussed that if a management buys out the company, that is known as management buyout. If current management team is being replaced by a new management team, that is known as management buy-in, a new management buying in. Leverage buyout financing, a typical structure includes equity, bank debt, and high yield bonds. As an alternative to high yield bonds, mezzanine financing may be used. Mezzanine financing refers to debt or preferred shares with a relationship to common equity due to a feature such as warrants or conversion option. Like for example, convertible debt or debt with warrants. Those can be used as well in raising the financing, or equity or debt or any other instruments. Whom would they want to acquire? They would want to acquire a company in which they see value, which they see is selling for cheap, which they see that they can buy it and then turn it around and then sell it. So undervalued, willing management, inefficient, strong and sustainable cash flow, low leverage assets. These are the companies, these are the characteristics that these LBOs may look for in a target company. Venture capital. In venture capital, the company in which you are investing into, that is known as portfolio company. Risk is very high, returns are also high, long-term investments. Key point to note in venture capital are these stages and what happens in each of these stages. So remember, steps of financing in venture capital can be categorized into three broad stages. formative, later, and mezzanine. Formative, later, and mezzanine. In formative stage, there are further sub-steps: angel investing, seed stage, and early stage. So initially, when you are making a venture, what you do is that you go around and you ask for first investor. That is investor providing the investment at idea stage. And these are usually your relatives or maybe friends or maybe an entrepreneur who want to invest into this idea or maybe a fund. So angel investing is the capital provided at the stage of idea. Then once you have got the capital to develop idea, then you need to develop product. So seed stage is financing is the financing to develop product. Then once you have developed the product, then you need to sell it, and for that you need to run a business, and for running a small business or starting business at a small scale you need some financing. That is early stage financing, which is provided before commercial production and sales. So these are formative stage financing. These are the types of financing or stages of financing during the formation of the business. Once you have formed the business, then you want to expand it. When you want to expand it, you need some financing, that is known as later stage financing. Once you have expanded it and you have grown in size, now you may want to go for IPO. When you want to go for IPO, you will need some financing, that is known as mezzanine stage financing. So these are three stages, and within those these are sub stages. So you should know all these stages, their names, their sequence, and their definition, that what exactly happens in each of these stages. That is, it is important to memorize. So these are private equity funds. So once private equity fund has made an investment, turnaround or whatever, now it may want to exit. When it is, and generally the time period is for investment is about 5 to 10 years of investment. And time to exit can range from 6 months. When can it be 6 months? It can be 6 months if you think that you have taken a wrong decision. Mostly it is that short when you think that you have taken a wrong decision and you want to exit sooner. Otherwise, you tend to invest for 5 to 10 years of horizon. So what are the exit strategies? You can sell it, trade sale. What is trade sale? That you sell it to some company which has some strategic value for it. For example, sell it to a competitor, sell it to a vendor, sell it to a customer, sell it to a supplier. It would have some strategic value and it will be able to take some extra benefit out of it and benefit from synergies. And as it will have synergies, it will be willing to pay a higher price as well. So some benefits, some disadvantages, you can go through these. IPO, or you can go to public and do IPO. Advantages for IPO, key advantages: you can get high price because there is a large group of investors and generally IPO prices are high. Key disadvantages: high transaction cost. Then others you can go through. Recapitalization. What is recapitalization? What you can do is you can borrow money and pay yourself a large dividend. So you have reduced the equity portion, increased the debt portion. So effectively you have reduced your portion and you have liquidated a significant amount of your portion. Some of these strategies would be used for partial exit and some would be used for full exit. Like recap would give you a partial exit. It wouldn't let any other buyer come in, any other owner come in, and it will at the same time liquidate some of your money as well. IPO, if you are doing for a small portion, again partial exit. Trade sale, full exit if you are selling whole stake in the company. Secondary sale, sell to another private equity fund. Write off or liquidation, if no buyer is available, you may want to sell the assets and exit. So these are the strategies which are used by private equity funds or venture capital for exit. Moving on, how do you value a company or how do you perform the valuation of the company? Same methods that we have discussed earlier. Comparable approach, DCF and asset base. So we wouldn't be going into it again because this is something that was discussed in equity part and earlier parts in valuation readings. Within comparable method, one of the most used multiple is EBITDA related multiple. So for example, EV to EBITDA, EV to EBIT, these are most used multiples within comparable approach. Let's do example. A private equity fund is considering purchasing a radio broadcaster that had an EBITDA of 200 million. In the past year, 3 radio broadcasting companies were sold for 8, 10 and 9 EBITDA. So one was sold for 8 times EBITDA, another 10 times, another 9 times. So what you can do is you can either take average of these, or if you want to know highest price, you can take the highest one, or if you want to know the lowest possible price, you can take the lowest one. Based on this information, maximum value of fund is most likely to this fund is most likely to assign to the broadcaster is. So for maximum value, you need to take maximum multiple. So it should be 10 times EBITDA. And what is EBITDA? EBITDA is 200 million. So it should be 10 into 200. That is 2000 million or $2 billion. C is the answer. So this is about private equity fund. Again, due diligence will need to be performed before you invest. So we did hedge funds, then we did private equity funds, and next is real estate. Why would anyone want to invest into real estate? So key reasons are the same as the reasons for alternative investment. Long-term return, lessen cash flow impact from economic shocks, diversification benefits, potential to provide inflation hedge. So these are the key reasons why someone would want to invest into real estate, and key reason among all is diversification, obviously, because it helps diversify, because it has low correlation with traditional investment. Unique features, indivisibility, you cannot break a house into 10 parts. Unique characteristics, no two properties are identical. Fixed location typically requires operational management. These are some unique features of real estate. Forms of investment, how can you invest? So you can either make debt based investment or equity based, or you can have a private investment or public investment. Debt and private means, for example, mortgages, construction lending. Equity, that is ownership, and private means that you go and buy something, that is direct ownership. Equity and public means that you buy shares of a company which invests into real estate. A public company which invests into real estate, for example, REIT. Debt and public would mean that you buy those debt securities which are backed by real estate. So for example, mortgage backed securities or collateralized mortgage obligation. So these are the basic forms in which real estate investments can be made. Again, something that will have been discussed in fixed income, asset-backed securities, equity, and other topics. Investment categories. So categories can include residential properties or commercial properties or REIT or mortgage-backed securities or CMBS, timberland, farmland. What are residential properties? Residential properties are those properties which are owned by families or which are owned by people for their as their residences. So single family houses, multi-family houses, all those are residential properties. Commercial properties are those properties which are owned for the purpose of earning money. So for example, which are given on rent or for commercial purposes, like for example, office, retail, industrial, warehouse, hospitality, and others. Success of investment is a result of several factors including property management, economic conditions, market conditions, terms of financing, etc. So if let's say there is a mall, that mall's value would significantly depend upon economic conditions. If economic conditions are better, if economy is doing good, there will be footfall in mall and there will be purchasing in mall, business will be doing good and mall's value will increase. If economic conditions weaken, mall's value can fall, shopping mall's value can fall. REIT investing, what is REIT? REIT is a real estate investment trust. What does it do? It is a company which invests into properties. So let's say A, B, C, D. So these properties will pay dividends, will pay rent, and these rents will be collected, and most of these rents, more than 90%, will be distributed as dividends to investors. This is what REITs do. They invest into property, generate rent, give that rent as dividend to investor. Keep these, if this REIT is is publicly listed, then it is known as publicly listed equity or public investment. And you can simply buy the shares of that company to get exposure to real estate. They have tax advantage status. Usually almost 90% of revenues are distributed as dividends. Business strategy is to maximize property occupancy rates and rents, because eventually the business model is to get rents and generate income through rents. Then mortgage-backed securities, which were discussed in detail in ABS, asset-backed securities topic, may be issued publicly or privately. These are securities which are backed by a pool of assets, and that pool of assets are mortgages on residential or commercial properties. Commercial mortgage-backed securities, again backed by pool of assets, and that pool of asset is commercial mortgages. These assets can be used to issue securities, and within these assets there can be certain amount being financed through debt and certain being financed through owner's equity. Owner's equity remain be equity. Against this debt you can issue different types of securities with different ratings. So you can issue senior securities, you can issue subordinated, you can issue high return, high risk, low return, low risk. Another type of property is timberland and farmland. So generally there are three primary return drivers for these lands. One is biological growth, that is overall growth of this timber or whatever you are growing in farm. Then commodity price changes. If price changes, if biological growth changes, volume will change and so return will change. If price changes, value will change and so return will change. And land price changes, that is price of land itself. So value or return drivers on these types of investments would be related to what you are producing on that land, and the price of that production, quantity of that production, and also the value of land itself. So both of these would be same. Just so these are different types of real estate, forms of real estate. Now the question is that how do you value real estate, or how do you perform valuation of real estate? Simply speaking, valuation concept remains be the same. Forecast future benefit, calculate present value. That is known as value. That's how we calculate value. Now the question is that how do you forecast future benefit, or what is this benefit? Is it free cash flow? Is it free cash flow to firm or what? In real estate, obviously you do not have any free cash flow to firm or free cash flow to equity. So what you do is you take NOI, net operating income. Net operating income is gross income, let's say from rent, minus taxes, minus other expenses, let's say for managing the property, plus depreciation. This gives you net operating income. So you take net operating income, you forecast net operating income for future, and you calculate present value of future net operating income. That will give you the value of real estate. Now the question is that either you can forecast it for all future years, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and so on, or you can assume that net operating income will continue to grow at a constant rate. and you calculate value using Gordon growth model, which is next year's net operating income divided by R minus G. So this is how you calculate value, that is next year's net operating income divided by R minus G. What is this R minus G? R minus G is known as cap rate. So you take forecasted net operating income divided by cap rate, and that gives you the value of the property. So while formula looks new, it is nothing, there is nothing new into it. You are just getting a future benefit and just calculating its present value using Gordon growth kind of model. This is known as income approach, in which you are forecasting income and then calculating value based on present value of future income. Another approach can be comparable sales approach. So you can find out a comparable property and you can find out the value at which that property was sold, and based on that you can determine the value of this property. Let's say there is a property A which you want to value. There is a property B which was just sold. It was sold for $1 million property, and this is something that you have to find out. Now you will compare these two. Let's say its area is 100. Let's say its area is 1000 square meters. Its area is 1200 square meters. Let's say it is at a good location. It is at a bad location. Let's say it is very old. Its age is 30 years. Its age is only 5 years. So that means you will start with 1 million, but then due to this difference of area, you will apply some discount, minus discount for area. Then due to this location, you will apply another discount for location. Then due to this age, you will apply a premium. It is very old, so maintenance would be required. It is relatively new. Premium, and based on that you can arrive at a price or value. This is known as comparable sales approach. We take a comparable property's selling price and then adjust it to get the target company's value. Or you can have a cost approach. Cost approach is the approach evaluates the replacement cost of the property by estimating value of the land and cost of rebuilding. So in this approach you decide that if you want to rebuild this building as of today, then what will be the cost that is required. So first you will buy land, how much would be the cost of land, then you will make building, then renovation, then painting, all of that. So what is the total cost of making such a building? That is known as cost approach. So these are three approaches which can be used to perform real estate valuation. For valuing REIT, you can either use income based or asset based approach. Income based you already know. Asset based is taking assets, subtracting liabilities to find out the value of company. So when we talk about REIT, so when we talk about valuing a company, how do we do it? We take some FCF or we take some FCFE and discount it, or the cash flows that are used in REIT are known as FFO, funds from operations. So you start with FFO and then adjust them to arrive at the free cash flow. How do you do this? So what is fund from operation? Fund from operation is net income plus depreciation minus gain from sale of real estate. This is fund from operation. So some analysts would use FFO, some would use AFFO. It is better to use AFFO. Why? Because this is adjusted for non-recurring items. So if from FFO you exclude non-recurring items, that becomes AFFO. So what you do is you calculate AFFO, then you calculate present value of all future AFFOs, and that becomes the value of the company. That is income based. Asset based would be simply market value of asset minus liabilities. So this is how you perform valuation of real estate or REIT. So this is about real estate. So we discussed hedge funds, then we discussed private equity, and then we discussed real estate. Next is commodities. In commodities, there wouldn't be much of new things. Key points to remember are that commodity return depends on price changes and not income stream. So for example, if I invest into an asset, it may give me a dividend, that is income stream. If I invest into real estate will give me some income, and that's how I value it. But in commodity, return is not dependent on our income stream. It does not give you any dividend or income. It gives you price changes. So return is dependent on change in price. And with return, you have some cost as well, which include transportation and storage cost. With respect to commodities, it is important to know sector and commodity. So if you are given a particular commodity, you should know which sector does it belong to. So energy, for example, oil, natural gas, electricity. Base metals, copper, aluminium, zinc, lead, tin, nickel. Precious metal, gold, silver, platinum. Agriculture, then everything else which is not a part of any of these. So you should know that which specific sector does a particular commodity fall into, and that is also pretty much straightforward and simple, shouldn't be a problem. Moving on, generally commodity investments are made through derivative. So generally when investors are investing into commodities, they wouldn't go and buy a commodity, but rather they would take position through futures, forwards, options, or swap contracts, and generally through futures. What are commodity indices? Index is that artificial portfolio which helps you track the performance of the market. So commodity indices are those indices which track the performance of commodities. These indices also typically use price of futures contracts rather than actual commodity prices. So these indices track futures prices rather than actual commodity prices, and their performance can differ or can be different from changes in real commodity prices due to two reasons. One is that they are following futures contract, and second is due to weightings. So in real, if you are having a portfolio, maybe in that portfolio, so if there are two portfolios, let's say A and B, or if you are comparing a portfolio with an index, that portfolio may give you a different return with respect to index. Why? Because maybe commodities in that portfolios are different. For example, one has gold, other has silver, or maybe weights of those commodities are different. For example, one has 50% oil, other has 20% oil. Other commodity investment vehicles include ETFs, commerce. You can invest into a exchange traded fund which has exposure to commodity, or common stock of companies exposed to particular commodity. So if there is a company which invests into commodities or which make a particular commodity, you may invest into that. Managed future funds, individual managed accounts, funds specializing in specific commodity sectors. So there are multiple vehicles which are available through which you can take exposure to commodities. Commodities again provide some diversification benefits. Although if you look into it, commodity have very low Sharpe ratio, but still they are and very high volatility, but still investors invest into it. Why? Because they provide diversification benefit. They have low correlation with traditional investments. Commodity price and investments. So again, something that we have discussed earlier. We know what is cost of carry, we know what is convenience yield, we know futures price. These two are new concept and very important to remember. Make sure that you remember these definitions. What is contango? Contango means a curve when or scenario when futures prices are greater than spot prices. So let's say this is your curve. So if futures prices are greater than spot prices, this is known as contango. What is futures price? Futures price is equal to spot price into 1 plus R. That means futures price should always be high, but that is not the case. Why? Because you have a storage cost and convenience yield as well. So that means that generally due to storage cost it should be higher, which remains the same fact, but due to convenience yield it can be lower. So as long as combination of these two is higher than the impact of convenience yield, futures price will remain be higher than spot price. This is known as contango, in which you have upward sloping forward curve and there is no or little convenience yield. Convenience yield is very little. But let's say that if convenience yield increases, this was the scenario. Now convenience yield is very high, due to which futures price is lower than spot price. Why? Because this convenience yield is very high. If this is very high, then overall impact can be negative. So if convenience yield is so high that futures price become less than spot price, that is known as backwardation, and it is a downward sloping curve. So this is backwardation, and this would happen when convenience yield is very high. So remember, it is very important, these definitions. Moving on, there are three sources of return in futures: roll yield, collateral yield, and spot prices. What does it mean? So there will be a return that you will get due to spot difference between spot price and futures price. Eventually both will converge, and as both converge you will get some roll yield. Or in other words, what happens is that when a futures contract ends, the assumption is that you will roll it forward. It will again be rolled forward, and the difference is known as roll yield. That is the yield that you are making at the time of rolling forward the contract. Collateral yield. So whenever you have a futures contract, futures position, there is always a collateral which is backing that futures contract. So when you have a collateral, that collateral would be making some yield as well, some return as well. Return on that collateral is known as collateral yield. Interest earned on collateral. Spot prices. So whenever you have futures, there are some spot prices that it is tracking, and that spot prices can change due to changes in supply demand relationship. So return coming in from spot price changes is known as spot price change return. So these are the three components of return: roll yield, collateral yield, and spot prices. So remember these definitions as well. This is again very important. So we discussed hedge funds, private equity funds, real estate, and commodity. After that, there are many other as well, like for example collectibles, tangible assets, intangible patents, antiques, fine art, fine wine, date stamps, coins, jewelry, watches, sports, many other alternative investments um, which you can invest into. So moving towards the end, risk management overview. So how do you manage risk with respect to alternative investment, or what is the risk management process? So first, investor decides allocation to alternative investment after consultation with others. That is, you consult others and then you decide allocation, that how much should be allocated to alternative investment. Then you decide investment vehicle. Then you find and decide investment manager. Then you decide amount to be allocated to each alternative investment, and then you conduct due diligence in making all these decisions. That is, at selection of investment manager, at allocation of to alternative investment, at selection of investment vehicles, and so on. So this is how you make the overall investment, and due diligence is the key part of managing risk. What can be the possible issues in risk management and investment with respect to investment in alternative investment? So risk management issues can be classified into private market issues and public market issues. In private market, risk management issues include funds being tied up for long period. So for example, if you invest into private equity fund, your fund will be tied up for 5 to 10 years. Investments require management. So for example, if you have real estate, you will need some maintenance. Due diligence is critical because data is not easily available. Intermediate valuations are challenging because data is not easily available. There is a risk of poor manager selection, that you may end up selecting a poor investment manager. With respect to public markets are more liquid and therefore prices are easily observable. So for example, if you invest into real estate or if you invest into REIT, investment into REIT would be more liquid and prices will be more easily observable. So that would be better, or that would manage risk better compared to going for a direct ownership. So this is risk management overview. Due diligence process is similar, or there is a framework being provided for due diligence process with respect to alternative investments. That is, you analyze the organization, what are the organizational structures, what are the funds that organization is offering, what is the track record, what is the reputation of organization, then what is the portfolio management process, what is the investment process, what is the role of operating partners, what is the source of investments, what is the how well is the integration of asset management, acquisitions and dispositions, then operations and controls, that is what is the methodology for reporting and accounting, are audited financial statements in compliance with the in compliance with the accounting standards or not, what are the valuation strategies being used, are valuations frequent or not, then risk management, what are the policies in place for managing risk, what are the key risk factors, and legal review, has it registered itself properly, has the structure being legally has is the structure legally appropriate or legally fine. Then fund terms, what is the fee, what are the contractual terms, what are the restrictions, what are the conflicts, what are the distributions, what are the carried interest. So these all are factors that are looked at when performing due diligence of a hedge fund, or of a private equity fund, or of any of the funds. So this brings us to the end of long reading, and let's do some examples. Angel investing capital is typically provided in which stage of financing? So it is formative, clearly later is for expansion, and mezzanine is for IPO. Within formative we have angel, that is at idea stage. Then we have early stage, that is product development. And then we have third one was, I think, later or something, in which you are running business or setting business. If a commodities forward curve is in contango, component of commodities futures returns most likely to reflect this is, so contango means future is different between future is different than spot price. And which kind of yield shows the difference between these two? It is roll yield. An analyst wanting to assess the downside risk of an alternative investment, downside risk in particular, is least likely to use. So we haven't discussed what is VAR or Sortino, that is not a part of this reading, but you can still answer this question. Why? Because you know what is standard deviation. So he has to estimate downside risk. What is a standard deviation? A standard deviation tells you deviations from mean, both on positive side and negative side. So it does not only tell you about downside, but it captures the upside as well. So if an analyst want to look at only the downside or only the negative side of deviation, then he would not use or will not use standard deviation of returns. So C cannot be the answer. Sorry, C cannot be the measure. So that's why it is the answer, because they asked about least likely used method. So this is it.